to take handcuffs off an individual?
Yes.
And is that the key that you used?
Yes.
And
Just came in. Sorry, I was late.
did you provide some additional direction to the law enforcement officer who was with you?
Yes.
And what was the nature of that?
I inquired to the events prior to my arrival, and I also directed him to do chest compressions.
And was that when those chest compressions, upon your direction, was that when chest compressions first began, to your knowledge?
To my knowledge, chest compressions began when I initiated them with Minneapolis PD.
Okay. And when you say initiated them, was that a direction that you gave to the officer to
Yes.
start compressions?
Yes.
All right. I'm going to put on the screen an exhibit that has been testified about. Can you just describe what's shown here?
That is the patient on our stretcher. That is the back of our ambulance. That is me in a paramedic uniform. I am checking for a carotid pulse.
And was this subsequent to, after your initial check on the street?
I was reconfirming my initial assessment.
And again,
yes, he still did not have a pulse.
okay. And then let's move to Exhibit 58, please. And what are you doing in Exhibit 58?
Checking for a pulse, repositioning.
He's
When
choking
you say
him.
repositioning, just tell the jury why you might reposition somebody.
I was just hoping to find a pulse and reposition for an airway. Just reconfirming that I needed to start working a cardiac arrest.
And had anything changed in terms of your initial assessment?
No miss.
So you were not able to detect a pulse? Is that
Correct.
right? And did he appear to be breathing?
No miss.
All right, we'll move to Exhibit 59.
This guy doesn't seem like he gives a
And you
shit.
indicated that you had given some direction to an officer to start chest compressions. Can you just describe what's shown here?
It appears to be the officer starting chest compressions.
It appears to be. He
And
testifies
let's move to
good.
Exhibit 60, please. And in terms of injuries noted, what injuries did you observe on Mr. Floyd?
Some relatively superficial injuries that I don't believe at the time would resolve in a cardiac arrest.
And I think you made 2 arrows, one to the nose area and one to the left shoulder area. In terms of your treatment of the patient, were these, you said superficial, were these not your primary concern?
No, the cardiac arrest was my primary concern.
If a person doesn't have a heartbeat,
And then
the
we'll
other
put
injuries don't
on
matter.
Exhibit 61, which has already been admitted on the screen. And again, just with respect to the injuries, is this image consistent with what you were describing?
Yes.
Okay.
Facial.
All right. And you're pointing to, you made an arrow on the nose area. What did you observe there?
Yeah, I didn't suspect a life-threatening injury, and I was going to go work a cardiac arrest.
Okay. But does that arrow indicate a finding of some kind? Was there blood or something else you saw there?
It appeared to be blood of a superficial injury.
Okay. But that injury not life-threatening is what you're talking about?
Not, in my opinion.
You were dealing with the cardiac arrest?
Correct.
Okay. All right. We can take that down, please. So
that the-
ultimately,
Was that a Black Mafia tattoo on his chest?
did you and your partner move with the patient to another location?
Once the individual was loaded, I had directed my partner to move us somewhere more secure and stable and to update fire
And when you say update fire, what does that mean?
to our new location, and that we're working a full arrest.
So I understand, when you inform fire that you're working a full arrest, what is the message that you're trying to get across? Is there a need that you have?
I requested them code 3 as soon as I got on scene, and I was just reconfirming with my partner that I want them code 3 and that where we're going to be going, please get there to help. I'm in the back essentially working a cardiac arrest alone.
So what was your concern, working a cardiac arrest alone and needing fire to come code 3? I mean,
There's a lot to be done in a little bit of time, and I'm only human.
and does a cardiac arrest require a lot of hands-on?
Yes.
Okay. And while you're relocating and your partner is driving and you're in the back, are you continuing to assess the patient and continuing to work on the patient?
Yes.
So what, during that period of time, did you observe about his condition? Or maybe more specific, anything you noted about a rhythm or lack of rhythm when it came to...
Once we got the pads on, I noticed he was in a systole, meaning he is not producing electrical activity in the heart, and it's not perfusing any blood flow.
So when you say once you got the pads
It's a flat
on,
line.
you said flat line, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, and I'm going to try to finish the question. And then
Sorry, I'll shut up. Go.
It's okay, no problem.
Okay.
No problem. But let me just back up just so that we're clear. I think you said he was in asystole or flatline once you got the pads on. So can you just describe just how that works? You know, once you have pads on a patient, what are you able to see on your monitor?
Since I didn't feel a pulse, I put the pads on because then it shows the electrical rhythm on our Zoll monitor. It also allows us to provide a defibrillation in the event that the rhythm presented as such. But being it was a systole, it's a non-shockable rhythm per our protocols.
Okay. So I'll just follow up on that a little bit. You said the pads are connected to a Zoll monitor. Is that right?
That's correct.
And what's the Zoll monitor?
We can take blood pressures, get pulse ox, CO2 readings. It reads the heart rhythm. Take 12 leads on there.
And is that the way you're able to see what's going on with respect to your patient's heart? On your monitor?
Yeah, more or less. Yeah, yes.
And you said that at that point he was in asystole, which is a non-shockable rhythm. Is that right?
That's correct.
So does that mean then that defibrillation or applying a shock would not be something you could do at that point?
Correct. Per my protocols, you don't shock a systole.
Okay, and why is that?
It's just not what you do.
Okay. Is there...
You want to change the rhythms, in my understanding. It's not a rhythm. It needs other interventions to get to a better rhythm.
Okay. So in terms of what it means, right, when you say flatline or asystole, I mean, what does that mean in terms of patient status?
It means they're dead.
Okay. And what were you doing in terms of trying to provide whatever care you could provide, knowing that he was in asystole? What were the next steps you took?
I was working a cardiac arrest.
And maybe you could walk through that. So when you work a cardiac arrest, what do you do?
We initiated the chest compressions. I was trying to get our
Blood flow to the brain.
Lucas together. I got the pads on the gentleman. I was getting airway equipment ready. Starting to prep some meds and access points and stuff.
And at some point, after the ambulance was parked at another location, did your partner come back and assist with those things?
Yes.
And ultimately, did you set up the things that you needed to set up for your protocols in terms of, you know, IV and airway and those kinds?
I do not like this DA. I think she's confrontational. She's sporadic. She's fast. She interrupts. She seems jerky. She is not a good questioner in my book. I've seen her question 3 people now, and she's my least favorite out of the DAs.
Continuously also when your partner came back after you were parked?
Yes, we were continuing to work a cardiac arrest.
Did Minneapolis firefighters meet you at the location as you had requested?
Eventually, we met up to, yes.
And then what happened at that point?
We had the officer leave. Fire took over breathing. We had all that the airway set up, oxygen. He was on our monitor. We had the Lucas going. I started handing out drugs because we had to mix our epis and our sodium bicarbs and spike some saline bags, and I had just said, hey, get as much as you can.
Okay, so let me stop you there because you just told us a lot of information. So when you said handing out drugs, I mean, is there a specific, are there particular drugs you give when you're dealing with a cardiac arrest?
Yes.
And do those include epinephrine and sodium bicarbonate?
Yes.
And do you have particular concerns or particular courses of action when somebody may have been pulseless for a relatively extended period of time?
Yes.
And maybe, did you follow those protocols in this case?
Yes.
Okay. So after the firefighters get on the ambulance and the officer leaves, at some point, do you proceed on to Hennepin County Medical Center?
At some point, we headed on to Hennepin County.
And what was the determining factor in that, right? What had to happen before you were able to move to the hospital, in your view?
In my view, we got him to a relatively stable position where I could manage this cardiac arrest. We had the firefighters now, we had airways secured, we had some various drugs on board, we had the Lucas going doing the chest compressions, I had him on my monitor. I was able to just kind of conduct more or less this cardiac arrest
Stabilize him
while
and move
providing
him.
the treatments in route.
And while you were en route, did that treatment continue? Were you actively working on him the whole time you were with him?
Yes.
And while you were traveling en route to the hospital, did you at some point deliver a shock or administer a shock?
Yes.
Can you just describe why you did that and how that came about?
I was checking and monitoring the patient, and I believe saw a run of pulseless VTAC, and that is a different algorithm per my protocol, which indicates a defibrillation, which I provided.
Okay, so at some point when was it that you detected pulseless electrical activity?
En route to Hennepin Healthcare Medical Center.
And I think you testified that is a shockable rhythm per your protocols?
Yes, pulseless VTAC is a shockable rhythm per my protocols.
Okay. Now, what made you notice the change? Was there, in terms of the rhythm?
We periodically check in.
And when you noticed the change, was Mr. Floyd already on the Lucas device? The Lucas device was working on him, meaning giving compressions.
Lucas device was doing compressions at the time.
Okay. So initially he was in asystole, but then you at some point saw on the monitor that there was the possibility of pulseless electrical activity. Is that right?
Correct. We would pause Lucas, do a pulse check. It looked like a rhythm change of the pulseless VTAC. I elected to defibrillate that.
And was there any effect?
It just delivered a shock, and he remained in his quote-unquote dead state, and we continued on with the cardiac arrest.
And so, just to be clear, I mean, when someone is in the state that you're describing, are you looking for any opportunity to administer a shock or provide additional treatment that you might be able to?
Yes, he's a human being, and I was trying to give him a second chance at life.
But ultimately, were you able to generate a pulse or any positive change from that shock that was administered?
Sorry, can you repeat
Sorry.
that, please?
Did anything change after that
Her
shock?
questions are
did anything
horrible.
get better with
She's
Mr. Floyd?
scatterbrained. She asks three. She changes it in the middle. She doesn't listen to the witness when he's answering. She just asks a question. She starts looking down for her
Ultimately,
next question.
when you arrived at the hospital, what did you do at that point?
When we got to the hospital, I provided a report to the stabroom staff of the information I had and the treatments rendered.
And what was Mr. Floyd's condition at the time you arrived at the hospital?
He was still deceased. We were working a cardiac arrest.
Grounds?
Sidebar. So he said he was deceased. I don't know if he can pronounce him deceased. He might have said he was in a state that I thought he was dead, but I think he just made a determination that he was deceased, and I think a doctor has to rule that. I think that's what his objection is. This witness, you can tell, doesn't want to be here.
All right, so what we are seeing here with everybody putting on their headsets is...
So, because he doesn't want to be here, he's just... I mean, he almost has more credibility than the other witnesses because he doesn't have an agenda. He's just answering questions. He could give a shit. But I think he's uncomfortable because he doesn't want to think that he did something wrong or show that he doesn't know an answer to something. So he wants to get out of there. He does not want to be there.
No more questions, Mr. Smith.
Yes, miss.
At any point in time during your treatment and care of Mr. Floyd, were you ever able to resuscitate him successfully?
No.
Did he ever regain a pulse from the time that you arrived on scene to the time that you brought him to the hospital?
No, miss.
And did anything change in terms of your assessment of his condition and status?
No, I showed up, he was deceased, and I dropped him off at the hospital, and he was still in cardiac arrest.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
They didn't want him using the term deceased, but he got it in again.
Mr. Nelson.
This should be interesting. See, he's nervous that he's going to be asked a question he can't answer, or he gives the wrong answer, and then all his buddies will be like, dude, you screwed that up. This should have been a CBT 2.2, and you said it was not, you know, when you get in technical shit, guys will grill you.
And while they're...
Yeah, well, so I don't know what they're kind of, whether they, and I don't know if they've got him as a witness or not to call for their defense. But I mean, look, basically what this says, he was dead when they picked him up. He was dead on the ride to the hospital. Everything we did couldn't bring him back to life, and we were just basically waiting for him to pronounce him dead at the hospital. That's basically kind of what his testimony kind of led to here. Is that good for him? No, but he can't pronounce him dead either, and he doesn't know if he's dead. He doesn't know if he's passed out. Hopefully, this guys can go, can you tell the difference between someone passed out and not dead if you don't check their pulse? Because if you're fighting with somebody controlling the crowd, you can't check a pulse.
Good afternoon, sir.
Hello, sir.
Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks
Just
for
a
having me.
few questions for you. Not very many at all, actually. This is going to sound a little odd, but is it common to feel for a pulse with using your thumb? Like if I was feeling for a pulse on someone's arm, would you use your thumb? Or
No,
should
because
use
you can get a
fingers?
fake pulse.
Generally fingers.
Right. Is that because you have a pulse in your thumb?
Yes,
You
It's
may-
said to be, yeah.
good point.
You testify that when you arrived on scene, you checked for Mr. Floyd's pulse initially when you first came, correct?
Yes, sir.
And at that time, the officer Chauvin was, his knee was still on the back of Mr. Floyd, right?
What's the video show? He was still at the head of the patient, yes. I don't remember the exact location.
Of his knee.
Good
was.
answer.
Correct. There's a lot going on.
I'm showing you what's been admitted as Exhibit 56. You were able to feel where his carotid artery was while Officer Chauvin's knee was in that place.
Yes, sir.
Wow. That's hard. I'm not sure he could
You
have got a
testified
pulse.
that a police officer got in the back of the ambulance with you and began chest compressions at your direction
Yes, sir.
as you were preparing to engage in resuscitative efforts, right?
What's the... You're reconfirming what she's already gone over, is that correct?
Correct.
Then, yeah.
Right. So, officers in the back doing chest compressions, you're getting set up, correct?
Yes, sir.
You went to the second location so that your partner could get back in the back with you to take over for the officer, right?
not to take over. We needed everybody we could at that time.
Okay. Why didn't you just have the officer help you continue so you could go straight to the hospital?
That's not what we do.
Is it because he's not an EMT?
Any layperson can do chest compressions. There's no reason Minneapolis couldn't have started chest compressions.
That's not my question. My question is, he's not an EMT, correct?
I don't know the level of certification of the individual that got into the back of my rig.
All right. You wanted a partner who could help you out, correct?
I wanted as many people that were willing to help me at that time to work this cardiac arrest.
All right. And that's why fire came, right?
Correct.
And ultimately, the officer was kind of put out of the rig.
Correct.
I have no further questions.
Wow.
Now you're on.
All right, thank you, sir. You may step down. You bet.
So, this guy has credibility because he doesn't have an agenda and he didn't show bias, but he doesn't have credibility as being professional and wanting to answer questions clearly and cooperate. He was like, I'm here, ask your questions, I'll answer, and I'll get off. So, when you're kind of trying to judge the credibility of somebody, those are some of the things you look at. We got a new witness here.